Hello everyone. Today we will be tackling a pretty big project here. We're going to be supercharging the Mercedes E320. This particular Mercedes E320 has the M112 engine. They're shared amongst many of the Mercedes families as well as the Chrysler Crossfire. Now Mercedes did a special thing to these engines. They teamed up with compressor and Garrett and all of them and produced a supercharger for this engine. They also built some more lower internals and changed the compression ratio. So these are all things that you got to think about. But all in all, I've been acquiring the parts over a couple of years and am finally ready to supercharge the M112 engine. Theoretically, this should be pretty straightforward. I found some user posts, particularly from Brabus on MB World and their forums, back in 2015 and 2021 where he did this. His E320 was quite a bit older. The differences between his and mine were that this fan is electrical rather than belt driven. Theoretically, there shouldn't be too much fabrication involved, but the fabrication that I am going to have to do is particularly the cooling system. I already have brackets set up for the cooling and the intercooler up front, as well as the pump. And there will also be we'll have to do some special stuff with a pulley as well, because there's a lot of stuff kind of in front of the current intake manifold. So to start us off, we'll begin by removing the front air intake. Now, my air intake was pretty easy to take off, mostly because I've already modified it. This is just some aftermarket cheap piece of shit that I decided to put on because it kind of looked cool. Previously, I did have exhaust wrap around this, which actually did help quite a bit. But pretty much you just take off this mass airflow sensor. You will need to keep this. Do not throw this away. Luckily I have spares. But this is how this engine reads its load through the mass airflow sensor rather than the manifold pressure sensor. So this is very important. There's going to be a evap hose coming towards the throttle body that goes into the valve cover. And there's also an air box here, and I'm pretty sure, yep, there is going to be 1 or 2 bolts that you have to loosen up. But the big important takeaway of this is that you have to keep this mass airflow sensor. Now, after you have the air intake off, the next step is going to be taking the fuel rail off, as well as unhooking the wiring harness. Now, when you take the fuel rail off, you're gonna get some fuel on you no matter what. A good recommended tip is to relieve the air fuel pressure from this Schrader valve, I believe is what it's called. Just you can poke a Phillips head into it, make sure to put a rag under it. On mine, some fuel leaked onto my valve cover and chipped some of the paint away. But after you relieve the fuel pressure and unhook all of the fuel injectors, we're going to take it off of that fuel injector rail as well as the fuel injectors. And yeah. Now, after we did quite a bit of unwiring from the harness, specifically unwiring from the coil packs and the injectors, we're probably going to have to unwire parts of the alternator and manifold pressure sensor. But after smelling like fuel, we finally got it off, and we will proceed to take the air intake off. Now, something to note is that I have a lot of nuts in my engine bay, so I'm going to clean those up first to make sure they don't go down in the cylinders. And after we pull the air intake off, we're going to make sure to plug those holes up. We're going to have to unwire a part of the throttle body back here as well. I'm probably going to try and pull the throttle body off with the air intake. That way it's just easier to work on. And we're going to have to undo quite a bit of these evap hoses. But we finally got the air intake manifold off. We will be reusing the M112 throttle body. You can upgrade to the regular C32 AMG or Chrysler Crossfire SRT6 M112k throttle body. You can also get an E55 throttle body, or even get that ported. Each one apparently uses the same mounting holes, which is glorious, meaning that you can easily interchange these. Overall, the intake manifold looks pretty good. All of the mating surfaces are pretty clean from last time I regasketed it. And we're going to have to delete this front evap system for sure, because it's going to get in the way of the pulleys. There's a lot we're going to have to delete and a lot we're going to have to add. And there are a lot more nuts in this engine bay than I initially anticipated, so we're going to have to do that a lot, just more cleaning. Otherwise, we're going to continue to get the ball rolling. We're going to reuse our stock injectors as well. I do have AMG injectors from the C32 that we might swap in the future, but for now I'm going to run it safe, because tuning these things is a hassle and I don't have my hands on an AEM FIC. So we're going to go ahead and take this throttle body off, reuse it. We're going to have to stop at the auto parts and probably get a new gasket for it and everything. We're going to clean that up, and then we're going to see about this front system, and then we'll be ready to put in our supercharger. Now I just got done cleaning out all of the nuts, and I almost sucked up one of my gaskets, but anytime you're tearing something apart and putting it back together, theoretically it's best practice that you get brand new gaskets, even if it's been like 100 miles. These are metal gaskets. I believe they're like crushed into place, and after they're crushed and you undo them, they might not work the same or as effectively as a brand new set of gaskets. But otherwise, we're ready to remove that front part. Now here's a pretty scary part. So I was able to get this off pretty easily. I simply undid the connector after breaking it. Took out the top screw, and then I kind of just pried it off. I saw it was held in by two prongs up here. Now what this mounted to, it looks like it's part of the front timing cover, and I really don't have time or money to really redo that currently. So what we're probably going to do is end up chopping off the top of that mount, and that's going to be pretty scary part, because that means we're like, there's no turning back. In order to redo this, it'll be quite a bit. So I'm gonna go grab the supercharger and see if it'll even just kind of nestle in there, and see where we go from there. So after all that teardown, we're finally getting ready to get into the good stuff. In this box, I have all the goodies that we should theoretically need. Let me catch my breath. Alright, so first off, we have this fuel rail. I wasn't sure exactly on the mounting positions on the old fuel rail, whether or not it'll hook up to the new supercharger. So I went ahead and got a C32 AMG fuel rail, and a really good thing to look out for on like eBay parts and such is if they have other parts attached with them. So for instance, I got this fuel rail for 50 bucks, Came with 6 C32 AMG injectors, brand new. These would run you about 300 bucks. I got fuel rail and injectors with pretty good looking O-rings. We're going to swap them out, obviously, if we do upgrade to the larger fuel injectors for only 50 bucks. Next thing on our list, we got more bubble wrap, hardware. Your local hardware store should have plenty of what you need. Gloves. We also have a centrifugal pressure pump. We're just going to go ahead and use that for a cooling system. And we also have gaskets. Like I said, gaskets are very, very important, as well as new rubber silicone, what are they called? Linkages that link the intake runners and the supercharger together, that link the pipes. So I also got a set of AMG intake runners. These are pretty deteriorated, so I just wanted to go ahead and replace those. I picked these up for probably 150 bucks. They look pretty nice. They came with all of their original hardware as well, which is super great. That means I didn't have to go out of my way and find them. Got more just random goodies like clamps and such. I also got blue silicone hose and blue zip ties for a cooling system. And then, of course, the thing we've all been waiting for is the more than heavy supercharger. So this here has the same mounting to the engine block. So here sits the engine, here's the supercharger, here are intake runners. The intake runners run back into the supercharger. So what happens is you get air coming in through the throttle body, which we have yet to replace. It runs through the twin screws, then it goes down under into this intercooler, comes back up, and then down into your intake. So I went ahead and changed the engine oil, or the supercharger oil. You have to get some mobile jet oil. Luckily at school we had some. And then I also went ahead and got myself a clutchless 78mm pulley. Now this is bigger than stock. This is because I don't want to run 14 pounds of boost through this engine and blow it up. Hopefully this should get me roughly 9 pounds of boost. Special thanks to VTech. They're very fast, they respond quickly, and they're able to get me the parts that I needed for no extra cost. It was actually really nice working with them. I wish they got me a sticker so I could put it on the back of the wagon. So right now we're going to go ahead and take that throttle body gasket off, and we're going to have to go and get a new one from the auto parts store. But right now I'm a little bit too excited, so I'm going to try and see if and how it'll fit in the engine bay. There's absolutely no way in hell we're going to get that in with the bracket still on, so we're going to have to cut that off. Fun. I found where a lot of our connections are going to go. We're going to have to route some hoses somehow up to here. And then pretty much all the other hoses actually hooked up to the throttle body, which is pretty good. That'll be pretty easy, and we're going to have some fun with that. And yeah, cool. We're moving along. Alright, so we went ahead and gasketed and tightened down everything for the supercharger. I ran over to O'Reilly's and got myself a gasket for the throttle body, and now what we're going to do is we're going to swap the injectors from the old fuel rail to the new fuel rail. The reason why you need a new fuel rail is just because there's clearance issues. So as you can see, they're kind of laid out differently, where this one kind of comes down and makes a little hump to get away from all of the tubing, whereas the old fuel rail would get in the way. So we're going to swap over those injectors, and then after that we're going to get the throttle body on and tube it up. Now thankfully what it looks like is most of the tubes are pretty much one for one from the old air intake manifold to the supercharger. Yeah. We had just installed our fuel rail assembly with the old E320 injectors because I'm not sure about upgrading the injectors quite yet. We're just going to see how it runs originally and then we might upgrade. But we do have those on hand if we do need more power, baby. So now our next step is I want to get our intake runners on. We're going to do the throttle body last because I need to figure out a way to install this with this big hunk of metal, not in the way of any hoses, metal fittings, lines, or anything like that. Thankfully, it's not direction specific, so I can turn it upside down as need be. But otherwise, we have our fuel rail installed and tightened down. Our next step is intake runners, then throttle body and vacuum hoses, and then I'll need to figure out our cooling system. I already have all of the pieces and how I want it laid out. It's just time. It's just time that we need to put it together. Alright, so we finally got the intake runners on. There's still vacuum lines I've got to figure out, but otherwise it was a pretty smooth install. We got the new gaskets and we also got new silicone hoses to link the Y pipe to the intake runners. I still have to tighten those down. I did have to loosen up the Y pipe and kind of just wiggle it and make sure everything gets into place so I could tighten it down, but otherwise everything's going smoothly. And after that, our next step will be the throttle body, finally, that I've been talking about. Honestly, I've been avoiding it because that's where a lot of vacuum lines are, and I'm just kind of hoping everything reaches it. And I still don't know how I should orientate it, but otherwise everything's been going smoothly. When you do supercharge this, you'll have to change out the thermostat housing. Please be sure to go ahead and drain your antifreeze. Otherwise, you'll have a pretty big mess to clean up. For the cooling system, we're using the stock intercooler for the supercharger, but I ended up getting an aftermarket intercooler that is mounted on the front radiator support brace on the top. And we have the hosing going down into the pump, which I have placed right behind the passenger parking light. There's a pretty good bracket, as well as another pump there. And then so it's very similarly routed to like the SRTs. Right now we're working on the pulleys. We swapped one of the idler pulleys with from a ribbed to a smooth because we're attaching a second pulley on the supercharger, and we're going to route it so that it comes from the alternator to that pulley and then onto the supercharger pulley and then back around through its normal loopings.
It's up to you, kid. I just want to hear the thing run before I bothered wasting my time with those EGR tubes. Okay.